Magandang araw sa inyo lahat. Ako po si Christian Resguera at welcome po sa isa na naman pong episode ng ating Botopedia podcast sa ilalim po ng Participate. Ang Participate po ay isang non-partisan coalition na nagsusulong po ng political at saka electoral reforms. At isa po sa mga tinututukan nitong coalition na to ay yung pong laganap na problema ng disinformation o yung pagpapakalat po ng mga mali at malisyosong impormasyon, in particular dito po sa Pilipinas. Kaya ito po yung pag-uusapan natin ngayong araw na ito. At makakasama po natin ang isa pong dalubhasa pagdating po dito sa issue na ito. I'd like to introduce and welcome to our Botopedia podcast si Professor Jonathan Ong. Isa po siyang Associate Professor ng Global Digital Media sa University of Massachusetts Amherst at isa rin po siyang fellow sa Harvard Kennedy School. Magandang araw sa iyo, Professor, and thank you for joining us.
Magandang araw, magandang gabi from Amherst, Massachusetts, Christian. Thank you for having me.
Okay, maraming salamat. So, I suppose nadinig mo na yung announcement ng Presidential Communications Office kung saan pangungunahan daw nila yung isang campaign against disinformation. Unang-una, bilang isa sa talagang dalubhasa dito sa larangan na ito, no, you've been doing studies regarding this, and I think in 2016 study nyo, no, yung Architects of Network Disinformation, talaga marami nagsasite niya at maraming taong natuto dyan. So, anong basa nyo dito sa latest initiative by the Marcos Jr. administration to lead this campaign against disinformation?
Yeah, so I think I was struck with the news when it came out a couple of days ago. I'm obviously very skeptical and very cautious. Although on one hand, pag iisipin natin, di ba, na when a government says that they are supporting media literacy, they're supporting educational programs to empower citizens to be more critical when it comes to how they engage with the media around us, I welcome that as an educator. I think it's important that the government actually supports teachers, academics. Kailangan mas maraming tao na talagang nagsa-study nitong very complex set of issues related to, 'di ba, the pollution of our information environment. Pero I'm very skeptical kung lip service lang ba ito, superficial campaign lang ba ito, or could this be much more critical and is it really academically informed? 'Di ba? So parang when we say and especially nowadays na disinformation has become everyone's advocacy, I'm sure alam mo to, Christian, no after the elections, parang everyone started to talk about kailangan nating um uh, mag-study pa ng disinformation and fake news, but we need to be much more critical as well na there are some parang not all disinformation interventions are made equal, and that's why I'm a bit skeptical and cautious.
Okay, let's talk about these interventions kasi nga baka naman walang patunguhan kahit napakaganda on paper nung ganitong initiative, no? What would you like to see in such an initiative? Especially in this case, it would be state-led.
Yeah. So obviously the state having resources of the state, having Department of Education, you would for us academics, it's important for us in our research to feed into textbooks, to feed into lesson plans. Pero kailangan din nating i-audit at alamin kung ano ba talaga yung mapapasok sa mga lesson plan. Ano ba yung mapapasok sa mga textbook? Ano ba yung mga teaching modules na ipapakalat ng gobyerno, 'di ba? So ito for me, it's important that government really consults people on the front lines, studying disinformation and also responding to disinformation. So academics like us, myself and many other academics who are based in the Philippines, and a lot of junior colleagues who are doing excellent work. I would like to see their work get cited, get incorporated dito sa mga training modules, dito sa mga lesson plan na dapat ipakalat. So,
Mm.
there's ways kasi na of thinking about teaching this info na very technical lang, na parang, look at the website, sino ba yung source nito? So, I
Mm.
find that very superficial. So, there's ways of teaching disinformation studies in a more critical fashion to really understand power dynamics, to really understand the business behind this info. Alam mo naman, Christian, na that's where my research really started from, di ba?
Mm.
Understanding the real people and workers behind this info campaigns. And obviously, I would love for these kinds of modules to incorporate reporting from journalists, podcasts like what you have produced, Christian, not only with this show, but also with Facts First. So you would like all of those interventions to be incorporated in a critical fashion, but also curated thoughtfully. So yung paggawa ng lesson plan, yung paggawa ng campaign, hindi lang sa kung anong gusto ni influencer or kung
Mm.
anong gusto ni commissioner. So kailangan may teachers and academics na involved din dito. So that's why I'm in a wait and see kind of attitude right now after hearing this news from Malacanang.
Mm. Kanina sabi mo not all interventions are created equal and I think that's pretty obvious, no? Ano ba yung nakikita mong pinaka-effective na strategy or pinaka-effective intervention, specifically dito sa Philippine context?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we see a lot of investment when it comes to fact checking in the Philippines, and I think fact checking is very important in the sense na siya yung first response when it comes to false news when it goes viral. They're able to make that correction very quickly. So sila yung frontliners talaga. So pero in my opinion, I think there's a lot of investment there already, and therefore we do need more critical digital literacy approaches. Itong
Mm.
digital literacy approaches, I haven't been honestly very satisfied with some of the modules that I have seen. I think there's some really good ones though. Yeah, I would like to shout out of the box media literacy. So I've seen a couple of their modules online, how to spot fake news. So parang in a much more introductory kind of format to empower ordinary citizens. Pero meron naman iba na parang um, I I'm quite critical, as you know, Christian, of yung mga approaches na troll hunting, yung parang using, technical approaches na
Mm.
to identify bots, to identify pseudo and anonymous accounts. For me kasi parang it's at even though yeah, I mean, you're able parang it gives you a certain set of thrills, 'di ba? Kung may sasagutin kang or may babarahin kang troll or fake
Mm.
account online. But I feel na we're not really getting into the power players, the disinformation architects, the political and commercial elites who are
Mm.
running the show. So I think that's one of the gaps in disinformation interventions in the Philippines. And yeah, and myself and some colleagues are trying to address this, right? Mm.
Mm. Yung dito kasi isa rin sa mga inanunsyo nung PCO, although wala pang detalye 'no, yung integration ng media and information literacy sa basic education. Although tinuturo na naman itong MIL subjects sa senior high school, dito sa Pilipinas. What would be a good model? Kasi madalas nating nakikita yung Finland model 'no. Ah, how can we make that work dito sa Philippine context? 'Di ba, yung start them young, teach them how to spot disinformation in a very understandable way, no? Especially for kindergarten. 'Di ba may nagsabi nga dati, ang pinaka nasa frontline niyan yung kindergarten teacher, no?
Mhm.
Ano yung
Yeah.
mga pwede
Mm.
nating ma-adapt dito sa Pilipinas?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So, and if I may also, plug one of our initiatives, myself and Nicole Corato, we also announced a community engagement fund. Myself and Nicole, parang we have research fund to actually offer collaborators, and collaborators that include preschool teachers, elementary school teachers, high school teachers, but also creatives, storytellers, playwrights, humorists, cartoonists, to do diverse sets of interventions that are meant to really engage different communities at all ages, and use also translating academic research in different languages into Filipino, of course, but also Bisaya, Ilocano, 'di ba? So the idea na dapat ano siya, customized siya per community. So I think it's important to have you're asking what would be a good model to adopt parang at that early age. So
Mm.
importante na to think about, how to teach this info, how to teach parang fake news busting in a more critical way. That actually is not just about how to get onto social media and looking at yung sources nila, but it is also learning history. It is also critical thinking skills from humanities. So parang I also want to emphasize na sociological research is important here as well. So parang understanding that, citizens are parang encouraging people to have healthy conversations, thinking about ethics when it comes to digital literacy, na it's a core component of digital literacy. I think these are parang not usually part of the traditional media literacy syllabus.
Mm.
So as one example, Christian, no? So when I do itong mga training, itong mga guest speaking to college students, I often get surprised that college students would ask me during Q&A. So thank you, Professor, for all your studies and for all your interviews with all these trolls. But I have a very practical question. How do I talk to how do I talk to my
Yeah.
mommy who's a
Yeah.
Marcos supporter? So how do I talk to somebody who's of the opposite political camp? 'Di ba?
Yeah.
So for me, that is not the usual topic of a digital literacy syllabus, 'di ba? Na
Mm.
it's often about, was this true or was this not
Yeah.
true? But it's more about how to model having healthy conversations. So I think that should be, one key lesson plan topic of such a media literacy syllabus. And I would like to see more of that.
Oo. At meron akong ano, medyo kasi mabigat yung problem natin dito, no? Kasi gusto ko mamayang pag-usapan naman paano yung mga yung hindi kasama sa school system. Pero dun muna tayo sa mga pasok sa school system, no? You mentioned maganda na customize yung approaches, yung syllabi doon sa siguro ay particular year levels, no? Doon sa mga pag-aaral nyo, did you or have you come across certain variations, for instance, when it comes to year levels or age groups or categories kung saan mas mahirap ituro or
Hmm.
i-bust yung mga nakasanayan. For example, pag college ba, pwede pang mas madali pang ituwid yung mga maling
Hmm.
pag-iisip? Or pag umabot ka ba, let's say, ng ano, nasa 40s ka na,
Hmm.
meron
Yeah.
ba kayong gano'n na napasadahan? Mm.
Yeah, mahirap talaga, Christian, to think about it. So your question was about, students
Customization.
and
Mm.
students and year levels na parang, like a grade 3 curriculum, how different should that be sa
Yeah.
grade 7? But parang even before you get there, Christian, engaging teachers. Like, how
Mm.
do you engage the school teachers na there's a sense na teachers have quite a distance from the most current social media platforms, from the most current, social media trends and hashtag campaigns, and parang the most buzzworthy topics of the moment. So kailangan mo rin i-empower yung teachers bago mo pang maisip yung parang how to teach the
Mm.
year level at grade 3 or grade 7. Um so I think parang first, how to empower the teachers, understand their digital capacities, first and foremost. What are their perspectives about um, digital media, but also their own critiques, perhaps, about our media ecosystem in the Philippines? So, una, kailangan maganda yung training module mo for teachers to get their
Mm.
buy-in, or else it becomes very technical. It becomes, 'di ba, kung whatever Mrs. Gonzalez, 'di ba, would say was correct, that's how it would go for her class. So kailangan parang to get teachers on board na itong conversations that they will have in a media literacy class is really to understand people's sense of trust in, media platforms nowadays, in news channels nowadays, trying to understand how people practice search, how they use Google search engine, or perhaps even Chat GPT,
Mm.
what are good and bad practices around it. So, kailangan muna natin ng research around itong mga basic practices ng teachers even
Mm.
before we get to the students. And yeah, going back to your question of ano yung best practices to engage students at various year levels. For me, having taught at mostly freshmen but also grad students, so my big gap yon in age group. Kailangan yung examples, yung core content mo can be very similar, kind of similar yung key themes of what you want to teach your students. So I teach students, for example, the practice of healthy deliberation, for
Mm.
example. Pero yung examples na gagamitin mo how to illustrate this, dapat current and contemporary and something relatable to that particular age group. So I think dun tayo sa case studies and sa examples nagkakaiba, but some of the key principles could be consistent across year levels.
Mm. How about naman yung ano, yung alam natin very polarized yung society natin dito sa Pilipinas, and a big part of the problem has to do with the political leanings, 'di ba? And these leanings tend to cloud judgments. So paano natin ipiprick yung bubble na yun? Ibe-burst yung
Mhm.
bubble na yun to be able to actually focus on what is fake and what is true. For instance, sabi mga teachers, meron din naman sila mga
Mhm.
biases, di ba?
Yeah.
Baka
Mhm.
naman sila naniniwala rin doon sa mga fake information. Kunwari, mga Talyano Gold. I mean,
Yeah.
how do we go past this polarization to focus on the real problem?
Yeah, that's such a complex question. For me, I think we need to be thoughtful and honest. Also, when it comes to selecting case studies and examples. So
Mm.
like in our own research, parallel public spheres, the most recent study that we produced in response to the 2022 election season. Na ang argument namin is yung problem of disinfo has become so big na it has resulted in parallel public spheres, 'di ba? A divided public sphere, meaning kanya-kanyang political reality, kanya-kanyang space na tayo in the multiverse, kumbaga, 'di ba?
Mm.
Parang to also borrow colleague July Tihanki's metaphor of the multiverse. So for us, how we tried to produce this research is to acknowledge, false news coming from different political camps as well. So not to say na equal ito, na parang the Marcoses did this and the other side also did this equally. It's not that. We didn't say that, but
False
we
balance.
also, yeah. But
False
for this,
balance, di ba? Pag ganun.
false balance, false equivalence. But we did want to say na we need to equally call out, for example, how Pulse Asia was ridiculed as false Asia. 'Di ba?
Yeah.
Parang yung pag-undermine ng survey mechanism because it did not fit into the narrative
Yeah.
na mananalo si Robredo if we look at the Google trend. So
Yeah.
we had to cite that as well in our study, 'di ba? So I think it is important to acknowledge this. It's not to downplay falsehoods coming from or spotlight falsehoods only coming from one political camp. And so I can imagine that's one way in which this kind of a media literacy course could show that its possible desire might be to rebuild spaces in the middle, have healthy conversations, and parang trying to acknowledge this info as a structural problem na hindi lang siya problema ng isang side. But I would like to, yeah, I think it's such a huge challenge how to come up with, a media literacy campaign or syllabus, and especially if it's going to come top down. I would
Mm.
like to see the administration and PCO to actually consult academics, researchers, frontliners who have actually been doing the work in this space.
Okay. Finally, Professor, so yung mga pinag-uusapan natin, the bulk is actually concentrated on the school system. Eh, alam natin mabigat din yung problem dito sa Pilipinas when it comes to education. We're not just talking about the so-called learning poverty. Pinag-uusapan natin pa paano yung mga talagang wala sa school system that they could not afford to benefit from, let's say, courses that would focus or trigger critical thinking. I mean, how do we get them on board?
Yeah. So this is one of the passion projects that myself and my team are trying to slowly build over the next year. And that's why we offer this community engagement fund to also invite more collaborators to come on board. So our vision is to create like a one-stop digital literacy hub
Mm.
for Filipinos, that will not curate from the top down like one version of a teaching module, but actually will curate multiple kinds of um, uh, teaching toolkits that will address people at various ages. So merong training kits for teachers, merong teaching modules for students at various year levels, and also translated in different languages. And we want to also host in this one-stop shop kind of website various podcasts, short videos, animated material. So yung geared siya talaga for popular communication of very critical academic research. So I think that's one way in which you democratize access to high quality teaching materials, and teaching materials na hindi rin siya partisan, but produced by independent researchers, also in collaboration with civil society, and mga very talented content creators na magaling talaga when it comes to humor, when it comes to visuals and animation. So I think that's one of the my passion projects. Having learned over the course of the past year, after the election, na maraming nagbasa nung Architects of Network Disinformation, pero marami ding nagtanong na, "Sir, nasan po yung Tagalog version? Sir,
Mm.
nasan po yung parang comics version na summary nitong
Yeah.
mahabang report ninyo?" And natauhan ako dun, Christian, na oo nga naman kailangan natin ng, not to dumb down
Yeah.
academic research, but to actually communicate it in a more creative way. So just to shout out one experiment at doing this, and I have been enjoying and also learning a lot from this collaboration. So Catch Me If You Can is a podcast that I co-host with Kat Ventura of Puma Podcast.
Yeah.
And this is actually a translation of Architects of Network Disinformation, where we actually interview various trolls, influencers, fake account operators, but also PR strategists, campaigners, and volunteers. So naka 2 seasons na kami, Christian, dito. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll be releasing season 3. And this season, we're actually going to try to experiment again. We'll have a couple of episodes where we will invite influencers of the other camp, of the Marcos camp, mga
Mm.
well-known vloggers and influencers, and we'll try to kind of put into practice what we said. Now we want to bridge our divided public spheres, na parang can we actually have healthy disagreements and healthy conversations, and real human conversations with the other side, na not to treat them as an enemy, but still a fellow Filipino. So we don't know how it's going to go, and we would love to hear from the public what you think of this experiment too.
Mm. That would be very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to that season 3. Well, maraming salamat Professor Jonathan Ong for joining us dito sa ating Botopedia podcast. And sana maraming napulot, although maraming information na bumagsak dito sa discussion natin. I hope makatulong dun sa mga nakikinig. Thank you very much, Professor Jonathan Ong.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you. At dyan po nagtatapos ang ating latest Botopedia podcast. Again, sa ilalim po ng Participate Coalition. See you next week for another episode of our Botopedia podcast. Maraming salamat po.